The CBD craze in Kansas is taking off, with even big retailers getting in on the action. Plus, more money to house state prisoners elsewhere creates competition for space at county jails. And we now know what the Kansas Supreme Court thinks about the adequacy of school funding. Is this the end of this series of lawsuits over how much to spend on your child's education? That's what we're talking about right now on Kansas Week. This is Kansas Week, and I'm Jim Grayway in for Pilar Pedraza. Is $90 million a year for the next 4 years enough to make up for years of missed inflation increases in school funding? Well, the Kansas Supreme Court today said yes, but the court is not closing the education funding lawsuit. Justices ruled the funding boost does meet the requirements of the Kansas Constitution, but they will keep the underlying lawsuit open to make sure the state follows through on its funding promises. The state had argued that $90 million a year for the next 4 school years was a number almost everyone involved agreed was enough. The schools suing the state, though, said it should be more than twice that much. They also wanted the court to keep control of the case so that if lawmakers began cutting funding, schools wouldn't have to file a brand new lawsuit. And joining me on the desk this week to discuss this and more, we have State Representative Michael Capps, Republican from Wichita. We have Adam Strunk, who is the editor from fantastic newspaper, Newton Now. And we have Wichita's Representative Elizabeth Bishop. Thank you all for being here. Michael, first of all, is this the end of the discussion for now? Are we set? Are we going to go through? We've been going through this for years, every legislative session, talking about school funding. Are we going to get a break now, at least for a while?
Well, I think you're going to see somewhat of a break because we're out of session. So the discussion will come back up, obviously, on where we're at in January when the session reconvenes. But I think what's really important here is the Supreme Court's telling us the funding has reached an adequate level. That's good. That's what Kansans want. They want their education funded. I think what's important now is we need to take that next step towards the accountability piece. You know, Kansans also want education funded, but they want their children to actually receive the education they need and be able to be competitive in the global workspace.
And so, Elizabeth, how much will discussion of school funding occupy your time next session?
I'm sure that it will come up a fair amount. Education budget and the education funding process is always of great interest to a lot of legislators, including those that are on the proper committees. This last time, the heavy lifting was done by the Senate, where the education budget was concerned. And frankly, I mean, my term for this entire session was dysfunctional. And the Education Committee was dysfunctional and never actually delivered anything. I believe the House had a little bit of a say during conference committee, but other than that, the Senate pretty much did it all. Agreed with the governor on much of it, and a decent compromise was reached, and I think it's a good result.
So how much of a sigh of relief is there for you?
I think we still have a long ways to go. One of the things I know is that the Supreme Court focused on the Rose standards and said, I know I was listening to a explanation by the Kansas Association of School Boards, and they said we're going to have to up our game. We've got extra money. We've been told we need to focus on the Rose standards. We need to now go forth and do that.
And Adam, how strong do you sense the push is for a constitutional amendment that would basically negate all this?
Well, locally, I haven't heard that brought up, but at least on the local level, it seems both of our elected officials supported that in our area. School boards, everybody seemed fairly happy with the funding. I mean, for our county, it means about $2.4 million in funding for the next year. So I haven't heard a whole lot of rumbling about a constitutional amendment. I think that just depends on who you ask.
And Michael, the teachers union wants that money, or at least much of it, to go to teacher raises. What are your thoughts on that?
At the end of the day, what's really, teacher raises are a component of it, but this money needs to go to the classroom, period. And when we talk about the classroom, we are talking about teachers. We're talking about their salaries, we're talking about textbooks, technology, resources, the things that actually affect the ability for students to learn and be competitive. So certainly I support the teachers union in the fact that the teachers need to receive some of that compensation. I don't know that I'd send all of it that direction, but it needs to be a major component of it. I mean, these are the teachers for our children.
Okay, Elizabeth, what do you think?
About teachers' salaries?
Teacher pay?
I think teachers' pay should be competitive with other states. I'm not exactly sure where we are on the rung, but I think it's probably in the lower half. And we need to be competitive, be able to keep teachers here in Kansas teaching our children.
And we hear people talk all the time, though, about what the administrators get paid. And there are a lot of critics of that.
My take on that is that we have administrators that do a job. If we didn't have them there doing that job, more work would be passed down to the teachers. So ideally, what the administrators need to be doing is taking some of the load off the teachers so that they can concentrate on teaching.
Okay, well, thank you very much. From schools to prisons, last week the state agreed to give the Department of Corrections more money to house prisoners in county jails and in other states to relieve overcrowding at the state's prisons. But as KSN's Craig Andrews reports, that is pitting the state against the counties in a battle for bed space.
El Dorado Correctional Facility, leaders here say that they would like to move some of the inmates out. It would be helpful to reduce the population because there are still 78 officers away from being fully staffed. El Dorado Correctional and all prisons have raised the starting pay to $18.26 an hour for uniformed officers. But there's still a shortage, and they say it would help at El Dorado and other prisons if the state makes a move to move inmates to county jails.
And reducing population would absolutely make a better world for us.
But moving to county jails means Sedgwick County has competition for space outside its own jail in Wichita.
They pay more per day than we do, so our inmates are then told you got to go somewhere else, and the state inmates move in. So then we have to go looking for other jails to house our inmates.
And sometimes that means moving inmates several hours away, costing more to Sedgwick County taxpayers. The state of Kansas still has to have the Department of Corrections secretary and a finance council approve the proposal, but it's being considered.
And Adam, what do you think is going to solve this problem?
I don't think it's a simple solution. I think that this sounds like a short-term solution, but not a long-term solution. I mean, what you're looking at, they're talking about them competing for space. Well, they left out on the federal side, there's still your county jails. A lot of these county jails will take federal prisoners as well. I know the federal government, we negotiated a contract in Harvey County where federal pays more than the city, federal pays more than what we would get for the state level. So they're competing on the federal level as well. And then the other side is, so how much more of the buck gets passed on to these local governments? Because the local governments, a lot of these county jails are also functioning as a makeshift holding facility because of our mental health care system in the state of Kansas. So I don't see this as a very good long-term solution, but I'm not the one making the policy.
And Elizabeth, isn't part of the problem that we don't want to spend money on prisoners? That's the public's perception, the public's opinion is don't spend our tax money on jails and prisons.
We cannot ignore the crisis that exists in our prison system. We are going to have we have already had riots, we've had great damage, we have people injured in the prisons, both fellow prisoners and staff all the time. It is going to get dire. We've got to find some solutions, and I think it's multi-leveled. One of them is, I know that there's work underway to improve the prison facilities in Lansing. That's going on. And then there's an increase in pay with it. So an attempt to bring more staff in and help ease some of the overcrowding because they double bunk them and so forth because they have areas where they don't have enough staff to cover it. And then thirdly is looking at the criminal justice system and seeing, especially where mental health is concerned, if there are different ways that we could handle non-violent, non-extreme offenders and keep them out of jail, find substance abuse treatment, psychiatric care, so forth.
But Michael, what is your fix for this?
Well, I think first of all, we ought to realize that what we're talking about are temporary fixes. To Adam's point, these are all things that we can do to provide some back pressure relief, but we're not fixing the underlying issue. If we do nothing, if we don't pass another single criminal law, we don't change one more law, we're projected to be 30% over capacity in 9 years. That's if we were fully staffed. So we've got to look at how we're going to reduce the prison population. I think we do that through, to Representative Bishop's point, criminal justice reform, which starts with acknowledging the mental health issue, but it also involves changing some of our sentencing guidelines, incentivizing reentry programs in the prisons to get these prisoners rehabilitated and out into the community again so they can be productive, tax-paying members of our society.
But aren't we inevitably going to need more jail cells? As time goes on, the population gets bigger.
That depends on your methodology to solving the problem. I mean, if your approach is to use a system that's going to be punitive in nature, and strictly punitive, you've done the crime, you're going to do the time, yeah, better start building more prisons. However, if the prison system, if the criminal justice system is about being punitive and restorative, then it's about introducing programs and training and the ability for these inmates to rehabilitate and become productive members of our society again.
But isn't that a difficult thing? Isn't that all easier said than done? Especially when you're talking about mental health and all of this. I think people have been talking about that for a long time. And of course, we want a better society where people don't commit crimes.
Sure.
But that's not easy. That's almost a problem that nobody has an answer to.
The state of Texas has managed to do very well with it in a lot of their criminal justice reforms. But it's acknowledging and realizing that evidence-based systems that have measured outcomes, when you invest in those, you save money long term. We spend roughly $25,000 a year to incarcerate an individual in our prison system. Send somebody away to prison for 20 years, you've spent $500,000. Multiply that times the number of prisoners that we have in the system, you can quickly see where our taxpayer dollars go. So investing in reforming that inmate and getting them back out into the community where they can be productive members of society with their family, with a job, and contributing, that's far more beneficial to our communities than continuing to incarcerate.
It is, if it can be done.
I've never seen so much consensus around the issue of mental health treatment. I think up and down the ladder from local to state to federal and on both sides of the aisle, there is a large amount of consensus that we need to do better. And that is a significant amount of the jail population.
Are you talking about mental health care before people commit crimes or after they have?
Both.
Well, they're married together.
Right.
You know what I mean?
But I mean, preventive mental health care is not easy. You can't force people to get help.
Once they're jailed,
Once they're jailed, you can. But how are you going to prevent the crime? You can't prevent mental health problems.
A lot of times those crimes are things like the voices told me to threaten my landlord kind of thing. And you've got a situation where someone is potentially a danger to themselves or others, and a commitment, because of the way the crazy way our system is set up right now, cannot deal with that quickly, and so you end up with placement in jail.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks. We have to move on because we have had a lot of rain, as you know. Weeks of heavy rain and flooding have left hundreds of roads across the state damaged. It is an unexpected expense at a time the state is already playing catch up on road repair. So what happens now? Pilar Pedraza took an in-depth look earlier this week on KAKE News.
Weeks of flooding, leaving more than 100 miles of Kansas roads and highways underwater, collecting damage unseen until the water recedes.
When you add moisture to a pavement and to the supporting structures of that pavement, that's always a bad thing.
At the state's Department of Transportation, they say road crews are just now beginning to get an idea of how bad the damage will be.
Probably some long-lasting effects of all of the water setting up against the roads that we won't know for a while.
Most of what they're seeing at the moment, washed out culverts and shoulders, some torn up asphalt.
We have got to take care of our state, and it needs to be done, and our roads have been looking pitiful for a while. This isn't anything new.
Kansas drivers like Valerie Phillips are worried, though. not just about the condition of the roads and highways they have to drive, but also about how the state will pay for fixing it all.
I don't know, how do you pay for it? We can't have bake sales.
Dealing with financial crunches for several years, under Governor Sam Brownback, the state swept some $3 billion from the Department of Transportation to pay bills elsewhere, leading some to refer to the transportation budget as the Bank of KDOT. This year, under a new governor with new tax rules in place and more money coming in, lawmakers left the Bank of KDOT alone.
We've taken from KDOT long enough, and that we need to get back on track and use those dollars that are in statute for our infrastructure in this state. If we had not put that money in, I think we would have been in a harm's way.
KDOT's Director of Operations, Larry Thompson, says that makes a big difference.
As far as people paying taxes, and I certainly pay them too, we won't see any change in that.
With the damage coming right at the end of the fiscal year, timing is in the state's favor as well. They won't have to start paying for the fix until the next fiscal year, which starts July 1st.
I mean, we're going to operate within our budget, and we'll take care of this one.
And so, Adam, in your hometown of Newton, how significant is the problem?
Well, we serve Harvey County as a whole, and we were one of the harder hit areas with the flooding, and we've been writing on this. Go drive out in Harvey County. I mean, especially the townships, and that's where it's a big concern too, because these townships are small governing bodies. It's not like they have a huge tax levy. It's a tiny amount of money they have to fix roads. Well, you have the Little Arkansas washing out roads in some places. That's a big deal. But what I think ought to be mentioned is the federal dollars coming in. We had a state disaster declaration. I don't know, I didn't look last, maybe 49 counties or more now are on that.
60.
Wow, okay, so 60 counties are on that. That provides a majority of federal funding to these bodies. These bodies submit basically like damage reports. Then they go through, the state is well over the thing where it should be the minimum to get this. They set precedent by giving Nebraska some of these relief payments with their own flooding, so we should have these coming. That should help out significantly, but there is still a small state contribution, there's still a small local level contribution, but those federal dollars should be a help.
So Michael, this is just one of the basic things the government is expected to do, provide good roads. How prepared is the state for something like this? Because these things are inevitable.
You know, if you rolled the clock back 10, 12 years, maybe even 15 years, you know, Kansas, that was one of the things we were known for was good roads. You know, we may have been a flyover state to some people, but we had solid roads throughout our state. And I wouldn't say that we don't have good roads today, but we do have a lot of maintenance that needs to be done. I'm glad that we've been able to end the robbing of KDOT. It's time to start to recover that fund. You know, to Adam's point, there is a lot of federal dollars coming in. I think we're going to be prepared to be able to handle what we need. The dollars are there. We do kind of have that already set aside. But the reality is we need to make sure that we're prepared for the next time and the next time and the next time, because Mother Nature does like to give our state a beating.
Right, and we have 100-year floods every 10 years, it seems like. Right? Well, on a more somber note, family and friends this last week gathered to say a final goodbye to a Wichita toddler whose death remains under investigation by police and DCF. KSN's Sarah Berlinger spoke with the boy's family.
They say that time will heal, but neither time nor reason will change the way we feel.
Family members say the loss of 2-year-old Zayden J.D. Shocklew is heavy and emotional.
My son was loved by all. Even those that didn't know him, you know, everyone in the community just came together.
Sunday evening, his father, Caleb J.D. Shocklew, was surrounded by more than 20 others who wanted to think of Zayden. They organized a vigil in his honor.
Balloon releasing is going to go up to heaven to reach him. 1, 2, 3.
The group read poems and held a moment of silence for Zayden, and many exchanged memories of him.
He loved people. He'd be in your face and tell you he loves you and if you're his best friend.
With many questions surrounding his death, family members hope there are answers.
I just hope we find out soon. I hope that I can hold strong and, you know, just deal with whatever comes and what that result is.
And it seems we have so many tragic stories like this. Elizabeth, some family members say there were multiple calls to DCF on this situation, and others say this was a witch hunt this is a witch hunt from an absentee father, and these are not easy cases to investigate at all, or apparently not easy cases to prevent. What do you think?
Well, I've served on the Judiciary Committee in 2017 and 18, and we created a bill, worked with DCF very carefully to allow DCF to release information a little more quickly. Unfortunately, it is focused on once the declaration or the finding that abuse or neglect had a part in the death before it takes
Right.
effect. And so there's still a long delay with these. And they are very difficult, especially if the family members do not agree. And we've had some cases like that, some very, very tragic.
And Michael, I know you've spoken out about this case before. Have you spoken with anyone at DCF about this investigation?
Actually, you know, I started receiving calls early last week, you know, with these reports. And so I immediately reached out to DCF to ask. And I got to be real honest, I was appalled. When I asked DCF about it, I was told last Wednesday that there had been no child death, only to know that you know, Zayden had actually died 5 days earlier. The agency obviously was fully aware of it. This transparency's got to get way better, but more importantly, we've got to stop talking about trying to reform the system and actually do something about it. We've got children that are dying. This is the second child in less than 2 months that has died on DCF's watch. This family, this child, had a history of engagement with DCF. That is known. The details of it may still be coming out, but we do know there was a history there, just as there was with the other child in April with Zayden. This has to change. We got to stop talking.
So Adam, as a journalist, how do you hold lawmakers, the community, accountable in situations like this?
I think you follow that up with saying, then what is the change? Because like, it's a great political issue to score points on. We shouldn't have kids dying. That's one that everyone agrees on. It's not a good thing going on. But what is that change? And that's where, I mean, do you totally restructure the entire system? Because to me, and just from some local work we've done, it seems like how we take care of kids, especially kids in need of care in Kansas, is based on how do we pass the buck and how do we pass costs. We have a privatized system, which isn't necessarily good or bad, but we have a privatized system. We were a state where we had multiple contractors for the state. We cut those down until we have 2 main contractors now. Those contractors work through subcontractors in our foster care system, and it's a level after a level after a level of stuff to sort through to make sure everyone's being held accountable. But even if we're holding people accountable, that doesn't solve anything. That says we have a problem. But what is that solution to a problem? And I mean, and not to take up too much time and get on a soapbox, but it's also the state passing down responsibilities down to the local level. We have a really important facility in Harvey County where we take in foster care kids, and these are some of the kids who've had the absolute worst trauma: sexual trauma, domestic violence trauma. You have people with substance addictions at 13 years old. You have these kids who are dealing with all this trauma, and you have 100 or more kids that go through there in a year, and then some of them do get out of the facility, which of course that's going to happen.
Right.
And then our police department's tracking them down,
right.
Or if something happens like a legit crime, then our county is paying to transport these kids and have these kids stay in juvenile lockup,
right.
Where that is the state's. Those kids are in the state system. That is state responsibility that's passed on to a local level.
But there's only so much government can do. A lot of this has to do with our society, has to do with families in beginning these problems in the first place. But I've got to move on to our final story. You've probably noticed them popping up all over the place. Shops selling everything from edibles to lotions containing CBD oil. Well, now, as KAKE's Lily Wu shows us, even more big retailers are getting in on the boom.
Drive by Central and West Street and you can't miss the big sign pointing to CBD sold here at Sacred Leaf.
It's a joint, but it's tea leaves inside of it. So
funny questions to more serious ones are often asked of Amber Spain. She's a CBD customer turned store manager who believes in the pain relief from hemp plants.
I have fibromyalgia, so this helps with my day-to-day pain where I can stand on these hardwood floors for 8 hours and I'm okay. I'm not going home crying from pain. So it really helps a lot with it.
Spain often explains that CBD comes from the hemp plant, whereas THC is the main psychoactive compound in marijuana that gets you high.
Marijuana and hemp and CBD, that's probably my biggest hope. I want people to know the difference. You're not going to get in trouble if you use CBD. We produce cannabinoids in our body already.
Starting next week, more than 900 Kroger stores, including Dillon's, will start selling topical products infused with hemp-derived CBD. Similar products already being sold at local shops like Kratom City by 13th and West Street.
It gets more information about it out there. It will help eventually push towards, medical cannabis in Kansas, which should happen in my opinion. But the other bad side to that is there are people that are trying to just take advantage of people as well. So knowing your stuff is really important.
While Dillon's will join the competition to sell CBD oils and lotions, local shop managers say they're still confident in their own products and services.
We have customers that stay in here for an hour, hour and a half, just because they like the information we give them, they like us, and they love our product. So that's kind of how we'll deal with that.
And so, Elizabeth, did you anticipate that CBD would take off like it has in Kansas?
Pretty much. I know people are anxious to have access to something for ailments like arthritis or fibromyalgia, various things like that.
Right.
Especially, I'm talking about the topical applications.
And you've said you've tried it and you've had success.
I've used a cream on my hands, which are slightly arthritic, and I found that I felt like I received some relief. Now that's a non-scientific.
Right. Well, Michael, is this the beginning? Does this take us to the next step of legalization of medical marijuana?
Well, I think we got, as the article pointed out, we got to separate the issues that we're talking, the difference between CBD and THC, which is, of course, the psychoactive component to it. Kansas has continued to move forward. Industrial hemp, CBD oil. We just had a affirmative defense with CBD with THC this year. Lawmakers amongst myself as well as colleagues were looking at it. We're looking at the concerns from law enforcement as well as the concerns from the community.
And Adam, where do you think this issue goes now in Kansas? Are we going to be content with CBD? We're going to go further?
No, it's just going to be a matter of time. You know what I mean? Like Kansas didn't officially ratify go through the prohibition until the 50s. Like you still have dry counties in Kansas. It's going to be a matter of time. I think eventually Kansas does have medical marijuana just because it's a common sense compassion thing. Like we have all kinds of Schedule I drugs you get on a cancer wing in a hospital. Like you're putting on fentanyl patches. I'm sorry, I'm getting long.
And we're surrounded by states that have it now.
Yeah, we're surrounded by states. 33 states have medical marijuana.
All right,
I think that just progresses.
Great discussion. Loved having you here. And thank you for being here. We would once again like to thank our news partners at KSN News, KAKE News, and the Wichita Eagle for sharing their materials with us. I hope you've enjoyed our discussion. We would love to hear what you think. For ideas about future shows, just email us at kansasweek@kpts.org. I'm Jim Grayway. For now, have a great weekend.